She stood just feet from the boardroom, ignored, dismissed, and told to wait like she didn't belong there. Minutes passed. Laughter leaked through the glass. Power sat comfortably inside while Amara remained invisible in her own building. A voice finally snapped, loud and careless. "She can wait, this meeting matters." No one corrected it. No one questioned it. What they didn't know was this. Every second they made her wait was sealing their fate, because the mistake they just made was one they'd never recover from. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Subscribe for stories that expose injustice and refuse to stay silent. Amara moved through the building with calm precision, the kind that came from years of discipline rather than comfort. She arrived without an entourage, without announcements, carrying herself like someone who didn't need permission to exist. To anyone watching closely, there was nothing uncertain about her presence. Yet, in this building, confidence alone didn't decide who was seen. Nexus dynamics had changed. The halls were sleek, polished, and cold in a way that had nothing to do with design. Power traveled downward here, enforced by titles, badges, and who was allowed to speak without interruption. Executives passed without acknowledgement. Assistants filtered access aggressively. Security followed protocol, not judgment. It was an environment where authority wasn't questioned, only obeyed. Amara Carter noticed it immediately. Not because she was unfamiliar with corporate spaces, but because she recognized what was missing: accountability. The culture she had once built on precision and respect had been replaced by entitlement. The building still bore her vision, but the people running it no longer carried her standards. Dominic Keller had become the face of daily operations, confident, loud, untouchable. He ran meetings like territory and filled rooms with certainty that no one challenged. Miles Graham backed him quietly, reinforcing decisions with numbers that few bothered to scrutinize. Together, they controlled the rhythm of the company and the tone. Anyone outside that circle felt it. Below them, Orion Sterling managed access, schedules, and visibility. Who waited, who spoke, who mattered, and further down, junior executives like Corbin learned quickly what behavior was rewarded. Dismissiveness wasn't corrected. It was modeled. Amara didn't confront it. Not yet. She observed. She listened. She let the system reveal itself. When she approached the executive wing, the response was immediate but subtle. A glance. A pause. A quiet instruction passed between staff. One assistant offered a tight smile and said, "You'll need to wait." No explanation followed, just assumption. Amara stood where she was told. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She checked her watch once and kept her posture steady. Inside the boardroom, laughter spilled through the glass. Decisions were being made without her, about the company she built. No one questioned whether the woman outside belonged there. What they saw was a black woman standing alone in a space that had decided, without asking, that she wasn't important. What they didn't realize was that every rule they were enforcing against her was about to be tested. And it wouldn't end quietly. The longer Amara remained outside the boardroom, the clearer the message became. This wasn't a scheduling error. It was a decision. Inside, voices rose and fell with confidence, punctuated by laughter that carried too easily through the thick glass. The meeting was moving forward without interruption, without concern, without acknowledgement of the woman standing just steps away. The system was working exactly as designed, efficient, exclusionary, and unapologetic. Staff passed by without meeting her eyes. Some recognized her uncertainty as something familiar and learned to avoid. Others glanced briefly, then looked away, relieved that the moment wasn't about them. No one spoke up. No one spoke up. Silence did the work for those in power. Dominic ran the room like it belonged to him. His voice carried authority sharpened by years without consequence. He leaned back in his chair, speaking broadly about strategy and expansion, dismissing questions before they fully formed. When someone mentioned governance or oversight, He waved it off with a grin. "We don't need interference slowing us down," he said, loud enough to earn approving nods. The room followed his lead. Miles reinforced every move with numbers, selectively framed and confidently delivered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence made Dominic's dominance feel legitimate. Together, they created an environment where challenge felt risky and obedience felt safe. Orion controlled the perimeter. Access, timing, visibility. When a junior assistant hesitated and gestured toward the hallway, Orion shook his head once. The signal was subtle but final. The door stayed closed. Outside, Amara checked her watch again. Still nothing. Her expression didn't change, but something settled behind her eyes. Calculation replacing patience. This was no longer about waiting. It was about being deliberately unseen. Corbin stepped out next, his attention glued to his phone. He slowed only enough to register her presence, then smirked faintly. "Meetings run long," he muttered, not stopping. The comment wasn't advice. It was a reminder of hierarchy. He disappeared down the hall, already absorbing the behavior he'd been taught to emulate. Minutes stretched. The air felt heavier. Amara noticed how easily exclusion functioned when everyone played their part. No raised voices, no overt hostility, just protocol, tone, and assumption doing their work quietly. Inside the boardroom, the conversation shifted. Plans were being discussed that cut deeper than strategy. Decisions about restructuring, budget reallocations, long-term moves that would reshape the company's future. All of it happening without the presence or consent of the person who built it. Dominic laughed again, this time louder. "If anyone has an issue," he said, "they know where to find us." The irony went unnoticed. Bystanders heard it all. Some exchanged looks. Others focused on their notes. A few felt the discomfort rise and chose to ignore it. Complicity didn't require agreement, only quiet. The door finally opened when Orion stepped out, irritation etched across his face. He glanced at Amara, hesitated, then said flatly, "You'll need to wait. This is an executive session." That was the moment the disrespect crossed into certainty. Not confusion, not delay. A dismissal delivered with authority. Amara didn't respond. She didn't need to. She simply met his eyes long enough for him to feel something shift, then looked past him toward the room. Orion swallowed and stepped aside, closing the door again. The glass sealed with a dull finality. Inside, Dominic noticed the brief interruption and scoffed. "Some people really don't understand their place," he said, smirking. A few chuckles followed. No one challenged it. No one questioned who he meant. That laughter lingered longer than it should have. Amara stood alone, absorbing everything. The arrogance, the certainty, the way power insulated itself from accountability. This wasn't just disrespect. It was systemic confidence that nothing would happen, that no one would intervene, that the woman outside could be ignored without consequence. What the room didn't realize was how much they had already revealed. The injustice had escalated from quiet exclusion to open dismissal, from oversight to deliberate humiliation. And with every passing second, the tension tightened, not because Amara was losing control, but because the people inside believed they already had it. They thought the story was unfolding on their terms. They were wrong. Because the next move wouldn't come from the room. It would come from the woman they decided didn't matter. The door opened without warning. The sound alone snapped the room into silence. Chairs shifted. Pens stopped moving. Dominic straightened first, irritation already forming as he turned toward the interruption. Miles followed, brows tightening, ready to defend control with numbers and procedure. Orion froze near the wall, caught between authority and uncertainty. Amara stepped inside. For a brief moment, no one reacted. The room seemed to hesitate, as if recalibrating what it was seeing. A black woman stood at the threshold of a space that had already decided she didn't belong. The air felt charged, stretched thin by arrogance that hadn't yet realized it was about to be challenged. Dominic let out a short laugh, the kind meant to reassert dominance. "This is a private executive session," he said. "You need to leave." Amara didn't respond. She walked forward, unhurried, eyes steady, stopping only when she reached the head of the table. The chair there, larger, slightly different, waited empty. She rested her hand on its back, but didn't sit yet. Miles glanced at Dominic, then back at her, forcing calm into his voice. "You were told to wait. This meeting matters." The words landed heavy, not loud, not aggressive, just confident in their assumption of power. Around the table, no one intervened. Silence held. Amara finally spoke, her voice level but unmistakable. "I waited," she said. "That was the mistake." The room shifted, but the balance had not yet broken. Dominic scoffed again, waving her off. Orion took a half-step forward, ready to enforce protocol. Corbin watched from the side, learning in real time how authority defended itself. Then Amara sat. The sound of leather meeting wood cut through the tension. It wasn't dramatic, but it was decisive. Dominic's confidence flickered. He looked at the chair, then at her face again. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. The color drained from him as memory collided with reality. The room felt it before anyone said a word. Miles went still. His fingers tightened around his pen. Orion swallowed hard. The laughter from earlier felt distant now, like something that belonged to another version of this room. Amara leaned forward, hands flat on the table. Calm. Controlled. "I am the founder," she said quietly, "and the majority shareholder." That was the moment the power shifted. Not exploded, not argued, collapsed. Dominic pushed his chair back slightly, breath uneven. Miles shook his head once, already calculating losses. Corbin's expression changed from confidence to panic as the hierarchy he trusted folded in on itself. Dominic tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. "This can be corrected," he said. "There must have been a miscommunication." Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She slid a thin folder across the table, just far enough for Miles to reach it. Inside were documents, amendments, authorizations, evidence prepared long before this moment. "This isn't about waiting," Amara continued. "It's about judgment. And yours failed." That was when Dahlia Zaki entered, flanked by two security associates. Her presence was immediate and final. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Her eyes moved from Amara to the executives and back again, already assessing consequences. Dominic's posture collapsed inward. Miles leaned back, stunned. Orion stared at the floor. Amara stood. "You're all terminated," she said. "Effective immediately." No shouting followed, no argument held. The room had already accepted the truth. Dahlia Zaki spoke once, precise and efficient, instructing security to collect devices and escort the executives out. The security associates moved without hesitation. Authority had changed hands, and the room obeyed. As Dominic was led away, his earlier confidence gone, he looked back once, fear replacing entitlement. Miles avoided eye contact entirely. Orion followed in silence. Corbin didn't move at all, rooted to the spot, watching his future rewrite itself. When the door closed again, the room felt different. Quieter. Lighter. That was when Silas Rue stepped forward from the edge of the space, holding a tablet close to his chest. His expression wasn't triumphant, it was urgent. He spoke low, careful, revealing what had been hidden beneath the arrogance. Plans. Transfers. A quiet attempt to dismantle the company from within. Amara listened without interruption. The worst injustice had already happened. The worst betrayal had just been exposed. And as Amara looked around the reclaimed room, one thing was clear. The consequences were only beginning. Because the people who underestimated her hadn't just lost their jobs. They had lost control of everything that came next. The fallout was immediate and irreversible. Dominic Keller didn't leave the building as a disgraced executive. He left as a liability. His access was revoked, his authority erased, and his name quietly removed from everything that once protected him. Miles Graham followed the same path, stripped of credibility as financial records were reviewed and decisions unraveled. What they had built through arrogance collapsed in a single afternoon, and there was no appeal strong enough to undo it. Orion Sterling vanished from the inner circle just as quickly. The control he once exercised over access and visibility worked against him now. The system he enforced so confidently no longer recognized his power. Corbin watched it all in silence, learning the lesson too late. That loyalty to entitlement never saves you when accountability arrives. Amara didn't linger in celebration. She moved with purpose. With Dahlia Zaki overseeing the legal cleanup and the security associates enforcing the transition, the company stabilized faster than anyone expected. Authority returned to where it belonged, not through noise, but through clarity. Decisions were documented, access was corrected, oversight was restored. Silas Rue stepped into leadership without ceremony. His promotion wasn't symbolic, it was functional. Systems were secured, vulnerabilities sealed. The sabotage that nearly went unnoticed was stopped before it could finish its damage. For the first time in years, the company felt aligned again. Amara Carter stood at the center of it all, not as a spectacle, but as proof. She didn't demand validation. It came anyway, in the way people listened, in the way meetings changed tone, in the way silence no longer protected wrongdoing. The respect she received wasn't given out of fear. It was earned through decisiveness. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about consequence, about what happens when racism hides behind protocol and power, and how quickly it collapses when truth walks into the room. The humiliation Amara endured didn't disappear, but it was transformed into accountability that others couldn't escape. The damage left behind by Dominic Keller and Miles Graham wasn't just professional, it was cultural. And rebuilding meant making it clear that exclusion, silence, and arrogance would no longer be tolerated. Not quietly, not ever again. Because stories like this don't end when the doors close. They end when people stop asking who belongs and start asking who's been ignored for far too long. If this story stayed with you, pass it on. Someone needs to hear it. Join Black community struggles by subscribing and help amplify stories that confront injustice head-on. Your engagement keeps these truths from being buried.